Hi guys, this is Natasha, aka Natty Willie, and welcome to another episode of Natty's Book Corner. Whoop whoop. I did finally finish reading over the course of the Thanksgiving weekend. I hope everyone enjoyed their holiday, had a lot of food, spent time with family, can't go wrong there. I finished The White Princess by Philippa Gregory, and that was like the last book of the Cousins War series, at least up to this point. And this was the story of little Elizabeth. You know, the little girl that, was Elizabeth and Edward's daughter from the White Queen. Well, she's all grown up now. And the story picks up after the Battle of Bosworth, which you know a little bit more about from the Red Queen because it was actually from Henry's point of view. And if you remember, Henry is Henry VII, who is also Margaret Beaufort's son. And Richard, who was Edward and George's brother, again, who was featured in The Kingmaker's Daughter, a little bit in The Red Queen, and definitely in The White Queen. Well, he didn't make it after the battle, and at the time, he was crowned King of England. Well, now it's Henry who is crowned King of England, which, of course, Margaret is ecstatic, because then it was proved that she was right from the get-go, that her son would eventually rule the throne, and so she's all happy, she's all joyous, she's all rubbing it in people's faces. So, Henry and Elizabeth were engaged. Henry's mom, Margaret, and Elizabeth's mom arranged that during the events of the White Queen, and actually the Red Queen. You kind of got it from both points of view. So they do get married, although Henry takes his little time about it because he wants to make sure that Elizabeth is fertile. And I really had to question that decision because he got that idea from his mom, and I never really understood that because Margaret knew Jacquetta, and she knew Elizabeth's mom, Elizabeth Woodville. They're very fertile. There shouldn't have been a question of the daughters of York being fertile. I'm just saying. I don't get it. But anyways, you definitely get a little more interaction with, Elizabeth and the other sisters that were born from Elizabeth Woodville and Edward IV. Actually, you get Margaret and Edward, who were George and Isabel's children, featured a lot as well in this book. Margaret definitely had Elizabeth's back throughout, the years of being married to Henry, the problems and that kind of thing, the birth of a lot of her kids. And what I liked about this book is you got a really rare glimpse, at least to me, because I haven't really read too many historical fiction, unfortunately, featuring the Tudors, even though I've seen a lot of movies, regarding Henry VIII's childhood. And Henry VII and Elizabeth are Henry VIII's parents. And so it was nice to really see what he was like as a little kid and what personality that he had, at least, in the realms of fiction, just what he was like and that kind of a thing, and, him growing up with his siblings. Henry and Elizabeth's relationship was very tumultuous. It didn't start off good at all. You wait until she's pregnant to get married to her, and then you wait to crown her queen, trying to act like, oh, well, the York and Lancaster families are united, but then you treat the family with, just so much suspicion. Henry didn't really trust her that much. In fact, a lot of their conversation was like, well, what do you know? I don't know. What is your mom plotting? I don't know. She doesn't say anything to me. She's very evasive. It was like, well, why don't you know? I'm like, I don't know. They're not telling me anything. And that's like the majority of their conversations in this book, and it was just very frustrating. It was like going around in circles, and as the book goes on, there are rumors of this boy king coming back from the dead. It's little Richard, and this, really irks Henry because he's just trying to rule England. He keeps on, it was in his brain since he was a little boy that he was meant to rule England. Little boy Richard, the boy, is, winning everyone's favor. A lot of people in England are thinking, okay, well, this may be the lost York king. And Elizabeth's mom definitely put her in a precarious position, knowing that there was a potential that her son would come back to claim the throne by even marrying her daughter to Henry. Elizabeth and Henry's relationship, it was up and down because of Henry's paranoia. And Margaret was pretty much his most trusted advisor, and so Elizabeth didn't have a backbone. And the few times that she did stand up to Margaret, it was like a little bit too late, and she didn't really have enough influence on Henry to maybe save some of her family members. And that was very unfortunate because Elizabeth and her mom in the White Queen placed a curse on, the people that killed, Edward and Little Richard. And I'm not going to get into the curse a little bit, but when you think about it, it definitely brings it full circle, at least in her historical fiction faction, because of Henry's decisions. So I'm not going to get into it a little bit, but you can kind of guess what I'm going with that. So unfortunately, I couldn't get a male point of view. Like, no, I need a male point of view. And it really would have been nice to get the boy's point of view just to see where his head was really at. I think Philippa Gregory kind of does a pretty good job as to, you can kind of guess where his head was at, but at the same time, you're like, I really want to get into his head. I didn't want to get into Henry's head because I thought he had potential at the end of the White Queen, but not the White Queen, I'm sorry, the Red Queen, but after this book, I'm like, no. So the rating that I would give this book, I would still give it about an 8 just because I was not enthralled, but I did enjoy what I read, at the same time getting frustrated. Philippa Gregory does do a good job. Like, even though you're not agreeing with that person's point of view, you can still kind of understand where they're coming from while at the same time hating their decisions, which of course I did with Henry, and again a lot with Elizabeth. So it was definitely compelling. There were a few characters that were introduced that I would not have minded having their own story told, and that's Catherine Huntley. In fact, I do recall Philippa Gregory do a live chat because of the White Queen, the miniseries was coming to an end, and one of the people in the Twitter chat mentioned that maybe you should do something about Catherine Huntley because she was a really good character in The White Princess. And I was like, oh well, now I see why, because she was definitely an interesting character who was brought in later in the novel, who turned out to be the boy's wife, because he got married to a Scottish princess. What? So there's definitely a lot of stuff going on with that. It was just a hot mess. But that's just history, and in a way you gotta love it. So again, 8 for me. Overall, this was a pretty good series. Definitely a good read. So there you go. I'll be back in a few weeks with a few more books, and I'm hoping to eventually start interviewing authors for Natty's Book Corner. I do want to eventually do that. So talk to you later, guys. Bye.